and holster company. Today I'm going to be making a holster for a customer. This customer is interested in a holster for his 1911. It's a full-size 5-inch 1911. Looks something like this. A couple things that he wants for his holsters. One thing is that he's left-handed, so this holster is going to be for left-handed carry. And the other thing is that this holster is going to be a Western style holster, something that you maybe would see with cowboy action shooters. I think there's a group among the cowboy action shooters that use 1911s quite a bit. So that's the style of holster that we're doing. After it's finished, I'll put a picture at the very beginning so you can see what the finished product looks like, and you can decide if it's something you want to watch being made or not. So the very first thing that I did with this project is I created a pattern, and my pattern looks something like this. It's going to be folded. You're going to have a back piece that folds back like this, and then you've got a front piece that will fold like this, and then your gun fits in there. We'll have stitching along this the side here. So this portion will fit over top of the belt, and that's going to be the holster. I have to cut this out twice and laminate those two pieces together. So the thickness of the holster is going to be 2-ply of the thickness of the leather that I have right here, which is about I'd say about 5 ounces, 4 or 5 ounce leather that I'm using right now. There's going to be a little bit of tooling or stamping that I do along the edge of the holster, and this holster is going to be dyed a brown color. So first thing to do is, especially when you're doing a left-handed holster, just make sure that it is in fact going to work the way you want it to work. So I usually put it up against my body like this just to make sure it is indeed a left hand. And if you're making a right-handed holster, of course you can just flip this around and it becomes a right-handed holster. So your patterns, once you make them, can do double duty. They can be used for either left-handed or right-handed making of the holster. So I've just made a little check mark here on this side to indicate that this is the side I want facing up for the left-handed draw. So I'm just going to trace around my pattern onto the leather. I always use a pen for this step. Don't worry about the ink on the leather, because in a future step we're going to bevel the edges, so all that bevel and burnish the edges, so all that ink that we are putting on the leather will be removed at some later step. Okay, as you can see, we've basically cut the pattern out at this point. One thing that you'll notice is that I've left the radius corners cut square. One little trick when you're cutting leather with a straight razor is, rather than trying to drag that straight razor around the radius of the curve, the best method for cutting this type of an outside curve is just to take a series of short cuts. Along that line, and it does it creates a much better result than if you were to try to just drag that knife around the around your curve. And of course, with most things involved with leather work, just taking your time, not being in a rush, usually ends up with a better project. Okay, so there we go. As I mentioned, this is going to be glued onto another piece of leather, and so the actual thickness of our holster is going to be 2 of this thickness of leather. So you can stick the gun in there and just sort of mock up and see how that's going to work out. It's going to be a fairly snug fit for this gun, but I've done enough of these holsters to know that that it should work out just fine. One note about when you're making your pattern is probably the most critical aspect of creating your pattern is knowing where your stitch line should go. A general rule of thumb for establishing your stitch line. If you, what I do is I'll start with a piece of paper folded over like this. I'll usually place the gun directly over top of the crease that I just made, with the muzzle of the gun just almost at the edge, maybe a 1/16 of an inch away from the edge of the paper, and I'll lay the gun over. And then I'll trace around the gun, usually with a pencil. And then what I'll do is to establish my stitch lines, I'll take a ruler and I'll measure the width of the gun. And then for my stitch line, the general rule of thumb is basically half. Half the width of your gun is where you can place your stitch line. I have made holsters that are too tight before, so give yourself a little bit of room for error. So instead of making it maybe exactly half, you might want to give yourself a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch of extra wiggle room, just to make sure that your gun's going to fit in your holster okay. There's a couple little things that I need to do first. The first thing is I need to punch a hole in the top piece right around here, because this customer would like a strap that is going to come down and snap and sort of help retain the gun in place. So I'm just going to take a little punch that's the proper diameter for my snap, and I've already previously measured where about I want this hole, so I'll put the hole in there. That's where my snap will go. And then the second thing is I need to create a couple slots on the back piece, because I'm going to have a strap that comes around and holds the holster to the back piece. So I'm going to make those slots right now. I'm also going to punch one hole in the center. The center hole is going to be for a Chicago screw that's actually going to help keep it all together. So that's pretty easily done. So that the inside of the holster and the outside of the holster are both the skin side of the leather, you're wanting to glue the flesh side to the flesh side. So what I'll do is I'll just drop this down on a section of the leather, and I will trace out my pattern once again with ink. Okay, so I've traced the outline of the second piece. Before we proceed, I'm going to cut a slit basically in the middle of this portion that folds over, and I'm just creating a little slit where my strap is going to be fed through. So I'm just going to cut. And my strap will be fed through that little slit there. Okay. So the next thing that I'm going to do for this is I'm going to actually create the strap that comes and holds the pistol in place. It's approximately half of an inch thick, or wide rather. And I don't really care about the length at this point. We can trim it to the proper length we need later. There's that. That's going to be our strap. Very simply, for the construction of the strap, so that the strap has a good feel in the hand, we're going to bevel the corners of the strap just by simply running our bevel tool down the edge, like so, on the front side. Flip it over, give it a bevel on the flesh side, like so. Then while we're at it, we'll take a damp sponge and just dampen those edges up with just a little bit of water. I like to take just a little bit of glycerin soap, just a tiny little nubbin of glycerin soap, and I'll just run that along the edge.
Could you show it to me?
That's just a little piece of soap.
No, I mean up against the leather. Hold on. Okay.
So I just work the soap into the fibers, both sides. Really helps the burnishing process. After I get a good amount of that glycerin soap on there, I'll take my little hand burnishing tool. This is just from Tandy, and I'll find a groove that's approximately the width of the leather, and I'll just give it a little burnish. The glycerin soap really helps a lot. You don't need to do a lot of this. It's pretty gets a good edge pretty quick. When the edge gets hard and shiny, you know you've put a good burnished edge on a piece of leather. So that's that. Okay, I gotta walk out of. Okay, so just to sort of explain what's going on here, this strap is actually going to fit through this slit that I've just created, like so, and it's going to go over top of the holster. I made the width of the strap obviously the same width as my slit that I cut into the leather, and the way the strap is going to be fastened to the holster is I'm going to skive down one end, which is just simply removing the bulk of leather, making it thin on one point. I'm just going to punch a couple holes in it, and I'm going to rivet it to the holster, and it's going to be held in place by rivets. So I'll just, I don't know, about an inch, 3/4 of an inch or so, I'll just remove. This is a skiving tool. It's basically just a razor blade. And this particular tool is not as sharp as it once was, so. Okay, so this is just going to take literally 10 seconds. I'm just going to touch this to my belt and remove a little bit more material, skive it down a little bit more. Right now I'm just putting a couple small holes, punching a couple small holes in the end of the strap that I just skived so that I can fasten it to the holster using rivets. Obviously, 2 rivets are better than 1 so that it's not going to pivot on us. Alright, so I've just inserted our strap. Although you can't see what the holster is going to look like on this side, we've got our outline of the holster on this side. I'm just going to punch through with the leather punch so that we can rivet this in place before we glue it together. So that's what we end up with. Let's go over to the okay, so I'm just gonna put in a couple very small little tiny rivets to hold that leather.
You can't.
Sorry.
There we go.
To hold that leather strap in place. I'm using this rivet setting tool. This is from Tandy, and the dies are also from Tandy. So put our studs in there, flip it over, a couple caps on. I bought this tool just because I was getting a little bit annoyed with setting rivets by hand. Just does much better work of it. Okay, so we just moved our rivet and snap setting tool to a place where you could see a little bit better. While I'm putting rivets or snaps in, I thought I'd do all these operations together. I've changed the die in this tool. This is now dies that are used for line 20 snaps. It's the size of the snap that I'm going to use for this holster. So the bottom piece, just gonna go like that. And whenever you're using snaps or rivets in a holster, it's beneficial to always try to capture the metal part of the snap or rivet in between the leather, just because you don't want any gun rubbing up against that metal. It's gonna destroy your finish. So it's important that we do it at this point before these two pieces are glued and stitched together. So that just gets placed on the bottom die. You just run your top die down, and that's what you end up with. Now we're at the step where we can actually glue these two pieces of leather together. The only thing to be mindful of when you're gluing stuff up is if there's an area that you don't want glue touching or getting into, sort of outline where those spots are. So I'm going to actually be feeding a strap of leather through here. So I don't want these two pieces to actually be completely glued together, because I want to be able to have this free where I can stuff a piece of leather, a strip of leather through there. So I've just taken a pen and I've drawn a box around these two areas, and I know that I want to keep glue out of that general area. Everywhere else is fine to glue. Another thing that I found when I'm gluing is I like to keep the glue can sometimes mess with the burnishing of your edge, so I just like to keep it pretty light on the edges with the glue if I can help it. So the glue that I'm using, this is a product that I got from Tandy. It's called Eco Weld. It's a water-based contact cement. Seems to work well, especially when you're gluing stuff that is flesh side to flesh side. It's really gonna bond well together. And I just use one of these little daubers to apply the glue. And I should also note that whenever you're laminating two things together, whenever you can laminate first and then cut, you're gonna get a better edge. If I were to cut these two pieces out first and then try to get them all lined up perfectly and glue them and line them up perfectly at the same time, it's a really hard thing to do. So whenever you can, glue and then cut. So when we trace around with this piece, it helps us get things lined up the way we want it. So when I'm placing this now on top of here, try to get it as close to that as I can. If you're a little bit off, it's not that big of a deal. I'll just grab a tool. To make sure that these two pieces are bonded well together, I just got a little roller recently from Goods Japan, which is a good place to shop for leather crafting tools. And I'll just make sure it's a little bit like baking. Alright, so now I will, now that it's glued, I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to Okay, so at this point in the project we have our two pieces of leather that are glued together. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use this tool right here, which is a stitch groover, and I'm going to establish where my stitch line is going to go. In addition to establishing where the stitch is going to go, the thread, I'm also going to use a pair of scribing tool, and I'm going to, I don't know, maybe 2-3 millimeters off of the stitch line, I'm going to establish a second line, and that second line is going to be my mark for my tooling. So what I'll do is, I still have this little damp sponge. I'll just, around the edge, just really lightly get the leather a little bit wet so it will take an impression a little bit easier. And I'll go around. I'll put one of the points into the stitch groove that I just created. Okay, so that just creates a second line that's very faintly there. So I'll probably do this off camera, but I'll just re-wet this area here, and then I'll take a stamping tool and I'll put in my design, my decorative design around here and around the front part of the holster as well. Okay, so I've just taken my sponge, got it pretty damp, and I just went over the area that I'm going to be stamping into the leather. This is called casing your leather. You want the color to return to almost sort of normal before you begin. So I'll start up here. And just following the line that I created with the scribing tool, I'm just gonna go all the way around. Best I could that I made with this scribing tool, and follow that line with this sort of half moon decorative stamp. I like to do that because I like to keep the tooling off of the stitching line a little bit. I think it looks a little bit neater than it being sort of crowded onto the stitching. So there's that done. It's not as simple as just sort of running a stitch line around the perimeter of this whole pattern. It's actually, stitching's going to occur in 3 separate phases or steps. The reason being is I'm not going to put a stitch along the edge here until I'm ready to fold this over, and then at the same time I'll stitch this front piece, these 2 pieces together. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch from this point all the way around to this point, and I'm going to stop. And then I also want to put a stitch line at the very bottom of the holster, so I'll do that next. I'll just run one single line along the bottom and I'll stop. And then the third and final thing I'll do is fold it over and then stitch these two pieces together. So you can see that our holster is beginning to resemble a holster. This is going to fold over like this. We're going to stitch it. This folds back like this. We have our strap that's eventually going to snap onto the front there. So you can see it's sort of beginning to take shape a little bit. Okay, this is a Cobra Class 4 leather sewing machine from Leather Machine Company. I'll start at this point here, and back up a couple stitches and then go forward, locking in my stitch. I'm using a brown nylon thread, size 277 thread, and my needle size is 25. So at this point we've completed two of the three stitching lines that I need to put in. I did this one first. I went all the way around, as you can see, and I locked in the stitches here and here, and then I put the stitch on the bottom here and I locked that in with a couple stitches on both sides. The final thing that we need to do is to fold this holster over and glue it and stitch it here. Before we do that, I'm going to take it to the sander and get our edges onto this finished up first, because once it's folded in this configuration it's hard to get onto a sander. It's easier when it's open like this, so we'll do that now. I've glued it and I just have to stitch along my line. One thing that makes this step a little bit easier also, I took the sponge and I put some water down the front side and the back to the inside, and that allows the leather to fold a little bit easier. So it helps get things lined up a bit. I've completed that stitch. I also took it to the sander and I got this edge fairly flat and even. The only thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to finish my edges by beveling both sides to take the corners off. So I'll do that right now off camera and I'll come back to you when I'm done. Beveling tool, and I then took a sponge and I wet the edges a little bit all the way around. And I also took a little bit more of that little glycerin soap and I rubbed it into the fibers on the edge of the leather. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this. This is a tool that I used for getting a good edge on my leather work. It's just a burnishing tool that's chucked up into my drill press, and we'll use it to establish a good burnished edge. I'm going to figure out where to put the top part of the snap. With a gun in there, this is what it's going to look like. This snap comes over like that, and a good way to sort of establish where to put that snap is just by pressing hard on the snap area, and you can just barely see there's a little circle impression that's done on this flesh side of the strap, and that's where I know I need to put my hole. Okay, so we have our two snap components in place, and just as we did before, just set that down into the little dish. Give it a good squeeze, and our snap is in place. I'm just going to use a circle stencil to get a nice radius curve for the pull tab for our strap. So I'm just going to find a circle that is approximately the width of our strap. I'm going to leave about an inch below the snap, something to grab hold of to actuate the snap. There's my circle. So I'm going to use a professional oil dye. It's a fibing product. I'll use a dauber to apply the dye. I'll put just 2 or 3 coats of this Spanish brown colored oil dye onto the leather, and I'll let that dry. And then after I let that dry, I'll give it a good buff with a soft cloth. And then I'll apply this to the outside, which is Cornova cream, which I really like. It conditions the leather, but it also seems to do something with the dye where it dissipates the pigmentation of the dye, and it gives it a really nice look. And I'll let that dry, and then my final coat is just a coat of acrylic resin. Completed the holster. This is how it's come out. A couple things we did off of camera that I'll just briefly explain to you right now. We have this strap here that was Chicago. You just use a Chicago screw. Let me take this gun out. As you can see, unloaded. So this strap was just, it's got just a simple Chicago screw here that's holding it in place. I skived both ends of this strap and punched a hole in both ends of the strap, so it's being held in place just by this simple Chicago screw. Pretty simple. As far as dyeing and finishing, I use that Spanish brown professional oil dye from Fibing, however you say it. And I then went over with Cornova cream, and then I finished it with acrylic resin as well. One of the tricks that I like to use when I'm using the acrylic resin is, rather than just applying it directly, I like to get a piece of cloth and dampen the cloth first, and then apply the resin to the cloth, and then apply it to the holster. It's just one of the things I do. So as you can see, this is a left-handed. Gun fits in nicely, comes right up to the end like we want. This strap fits perfectly. So this will go over, the belt will go through here and will fit like that on the person's side. So there you have it. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Please subscribe and like it if you like it. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.